I'm Bob Tyson. I came to KVSC in 72, and I graduated in 74.
Okay. And what was your position at KVSC?
Everything from news director to sports director to there were 3 or 4 different topics who just made the best of everything. And
Utility infielder.
yeah, probably, yeah.
Okay. Very good. Rolling Stones curator.
Yeah.
Okay. Kelly.
Kelly Prayman. I came in the fall of 72 and left in the fall of 76. Never did have an official title and enjoyed it just the more.
Probably because you didn't have an official title. Therefore, no distinct responsibility.
Correct.
But you were a mover and shaker, right?
I was a rabble-rouser, and I liked to play rock and roll.
Yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, we have probably the closest thing to an administrative presence here. Peggy?
Thank you. Peggy Keene. I came here in 1968, and I graduated in 1978. By that time, I had a bachelor's and a master's.
Okay. I was going to say that took you a little while, but
Well,
that's all
yeah,
right.
but at that time we were kind of on the long-term plan.
Sure.
But I did an internship in between. At the end, I had to take, 1 class a quarter because I was working professionally full-time at Channel 11
Oh, okay.
at the end. So, yes, I was around during the transition.
Okay. Well, you actually predated these guys then because you were here
Right.
in 68.
I was here in 68, and I started in the spring, lived in the dorm with a bunch of pals, and as a youngster ended up at a kegger one night and met some really terrific people, some of whom are around here this weekend. And I was asked, kind of hijacked and recruited, I was on a work-study program, to come in and get everybody's signature on the logs. So that's how I initially started at this station.
How did you refer to yourself in the hallway? Your position?
Andy called me the log nag.
The log nag.
Some of that has translated into my current life as well, getting people to do things.
Okay.
Maybe I was less polished at that time. I'd just run around and chase them with a pencil and a piece of paper. Now I'm a little more inclusive and a little more diplomatic about asking for things.
Of course you are. Okay. So, at the time when you came to KVSC in 68, and for some years after that, the primary format musically was classical music. Is that right?
It was classical music, and we also got programming from National Public Radio. So every semester there was a selection of the programs. We had BBC, we had a variety of taped programs that came in. And then there was 1 hour of contemporary music a day, and it was in the evening, and we weren't on 24 hours a day.
Oh, sure.
So, it was limited. It was classical music. We had several really good classical music directors, but it wasn't the sense of what people wanted.
Yeah, young people in 1968 or 72. Yeah.
Well, more segueing to the era of these guys was into the early 70s.
So 1 hour a day of, we're calling it contemporary music. Was it Rolling Stones? You get to play the Stones for an hour a day if you want?
No, it wasn't. It's all classical.
But wasn't there the 1 hour a day?
In the evening, there was just 1 hour.
Correct.
That must have been before my
Little
time.
folk and blues.
Yeah.
Okay. So contemporary music, relatively speaking, but not like you're going to be putting on the Fugs or something like that. Something really revolutionary.
Correct. We
Okay.
were a respectable station.
And that's where you came into action, right? Who would you say was the primary catalyst of the change in the format?
I would say this gentleman,
Kevin Leisha.
Kevin Leisha, Dean Spratt, Peggy was very instrumental. It was a period where we went from suit coats and white shirts and skinny black ties to tie-dye t-shirts. And the music had to come with it because we didn't want to play classical music. And the culture of the station was not conducive to classical music. And
It wasn't conducive to the student volunteers.
Yes.
If that's what you rely on for your creativity and labor source. And so, it really was a matter of listening to what people wanted, and then how could we get there. And
The problem was that we couldn't get the kids on campus to listen because they were classical.
Sure.
Forget that, they don't even turn us on.
Right.
So when they came, we did the final thing. Peggy would have the hammer,
the gavel.
and we spent this whole summer going through it in each line on this bill or whatever it was.
Okay, so are you saying that you introduced a policy of something like that? There was you envisioned the station as it would become on paper and presented this sort of as a political.
We were part of the Radio and Television Guild.
Okay.
And the guild was funded by student activities fees.
Okay.
And I think there was some thought that we were underserving students
right.
if all we had was
Correct.
classical music.
Okay.
So, I mean, there was kind of a theory. It wasn't only noisy, rebellious, delightful, passionate people about music. Somehow you have to put together the reality and the justification for it. So the guild put together what they wanted in terms of a program schedule, which had, I think we left a couple little elements of classical in there. We cut back on some of the network programming, and then we put in a lot more of the music that people wanted to hear. But it took a matter of having a guild meeting, talking to Scott Bryce, who was then the faculty advisor to all of it. And for Scott, it was something that was part of his soul, really. He and Andy Marlowe and Mark Johnson and the group that's on the photo outside, they were all the guild in the first place. And they were a little bit more traditional. But when you have the faculty advisor who sort of holds the keys to everything, you do what he wants. Mm-hmm. And the time had come, culturally and everything else, to make some changes. And I think really that's what transpired. So we had a guild meeting. You can't cram the vote to do it and change the faculty advisor. You can say that's what you want to do, and then you have to have another meeting, in fact, to organize it. So the meeting was adjourned. The motion was made. The meeting was adjourned in order to meet the Roberts rules, and everybody went out and took a break. Whatever they did wasn't my business.
Something.
I see.
I did a little something, and then we all came back together. And I think it was traumatic for Scott.
Oh, yeah.
But ultimately, what did he say to you, Kelly?
Well, he said that with time, it became one of the most important decisions impacting him as a professor, because he could now dedicate his energies to the students in mass who came into his department, the mass communications department. He was not hindered by the concept of the radio station. His dreams could be bigger. Mm-hmm. He could talk to you and say, have you ever thought about, and allow you to expand past the Stewart Hall and St. Cloud and look broader. And that was what he was best at cultivating.
And Scott got very involved in the Holocaust Project, the
Yes.
museum, and did so many wonderful things with that. I think after, change is hard. And that change was very traumatic for Scott.
Oh,
I mean, it was just
yes.
kind of heartbreaking. But once, I've been through some big things, as we all have in our lives. But once you get a little distance from it, and you look at it, you can figure out that there are roses that are going to bloom. And then on the other hand, you have to work at getting rid of what was unhappy about it. Because you can carry around your guilt, your anger, your resentment. But then on the other hand, you can have an awakening. And I think that was important to Scott, and certainly to the students.
Huge.
And I knew Scott quite well. He was one of the reasons that I ended up coming to this program, and we were in Anik together. He taught in Anik and was my instructor there. I had wonderful times with him. Although he was a fan of classical music, he liked Pink Floyd's The Wall. We discussed that in particular because it is classical in some ways,
Oh, yes.
and it has
Oh, yeah.
something to say. So
Yes.
he came around. Now, did you ever feel, though, after you made this change, that maybe you'd let a genie out of the bottle? You might have had some freaky guys in freaky
No.
T-shirts.
No, there were 6 or 7 names that put in the hat, and they pulled out my name. I was the first one to play rock and roll. So I went out and I came up with the Who. We won't get fooled again.
That's good trivia.
And then I followed it with you can't always go what you want. But there was never did we think that it's going to be wrong. Oh, we thought it's going to be better. Every turntable was different, and it just you just did it and did it. We just perfected ourselves, and that's it, I guess.
And what year was this specifically?
73, 74.
73.
Yes.
So, I was thinking about this is also the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love, 1967. But it hadn't arrived in the Midwest, right?
Right.
It arrived probably in the early 70s is when that cultural change happened here.
Well, we had a lot of Vietnam veterans. We had people who were second-time students or had delayed becoming students. They had an interest in being around here a little bit before these guys arrived in '72. So I think that there was such an interesting culture of so many different kinds of people and ideas and things that were happening. We edited tape on the reel-to-reel. We had racks and racks of albums. Many of them contemporary rock and roll. We couldn't even play them. They got cataloged. But these guys were playing them in the dorm or where they lived, but they weren't on the air.
Right.
Now, the other part was that after the meeting, it was not chaos, that the old format was tossed out the window. We had a new faculty director, Rich Reeder, who had been consulted before, and he's much more easygoing. But the students had created standards. When I wanted to be on the air, I had to audition, and I was critiqued, and it was very clear what I did well and what I needed to work on. And then I was allowed a certain amount of time, and for weeks I would hear from Dean or Refrick or Kevin, the station manager at the time, or program director, how to improve and what I did well and what I didn't do well. But that went throughout whether you were reading news or not. There were standards, on-air standards, that were very much maintained by each of the students. And there was a pride in that, because part of being of KV was to walk out of the station and feel proud that we had done something.
And listenership increased.
Right. Exactly.
People liked it. We were the 10 watt. We didn't have a very big signal,
Yeah.
but it did help. It helped our campus presence. We weren't just down at the end of the hall in Stewart Hall. I think it was really...
Yeah, it was a good time. It really was.
Well, and each of us has taken what we've learned here and have gone professional in one way or another after leaving St. Cloud. And the foundation of being here at 10 o'clock on a Friday night instead of a party or the red carpet ingrains us with a certain ethic and a certain love of radio. The radio gene in all of us has come alive, and it's never gone away.
How did you put that to work in your professional life?
I went to work for KVSC in Grand
yes,
Rapids for
sure.
4 years.
Okay.
And then I did, 6 months KDAL TV, Scene 3 News, until they made a great decision and fired me. Best decision
We've all been fired.
anybody ever made.
But did you then pursue mass media in some respect? That was the main part of your professional life?
Couldn't make money in mass media.
Right. Yeah. What I find is that 98% of everybody that I've met that flowed through here only went into radio for a short time, or maybe it was a little TV or maybe a little something else. But most of them have applied the communication skills, and the social skills.
Right.
And that dedication you were talking about, to be able to volunteer for something you believe in, that's what they took with them. Even if they end up running a
and
shoe
the
company.
quality of music. It was. I didn't work for a radio station. I just worked for Heilischer Brothers.
Musicland.
Musicland, Sam Goody.
Okay.
And there are 1,500 stores at the end. And I just went up the ranks, and I ended up being a national buyer for soundtracks and rock and roll. And it was amazing to do that and have the artists come to you, and you, instead of waiting for them to come to the other side, you know.
Yeah.
He has a picture in his basement of Elton John with his arm around his wife, and he's kind of left out. But yeah, and that was because music plays a role in our lives,
Yep.
and this is where the foundation of it became. And part of it is to realize that.
Well, I went on to things like marketing and communications. I worked for a filmmaker for a while after I left Channel 11. Channel 11 had such a broad, at that time, the independent station. You know, my story list wasn't limited to economics or health or anything like that. I covered just about everything there was, which was fascinating. I'm a learner. I like to learn and to capture. Someone once said to me, you know, when you write the newscast at 9:30 at night, that may be the only story that people hear, or the only way they hear that story. You know, there's a responsibility that goes along with that. At one point, I worked at the Orpheum Theater. I was a ticket manager, and then I managed the house. So I worked with traveling shows and concerts, and we had a very early Prince concert at the Orpheum Theater back in about 1979. You know, I mean, so really just the base of it. And then I got into organizational business, helping with business development. How do you market? How do you find customers? What do you do with that? And it took me into the auto auction industry, you know, which is kind of a subculture business, I always thought. But it's enormously dynamic. It's a market indicator. Cars are sold one by one based on the value of the bidder in the lane. You know, I mean, it's sort of the stock market of cars. But, I mean, you know, it all originated in St. Cloud at the little radio station, being able to do things with people that were interesting and passionate, the things that I cared about. So, I mean, as I approach 70, you know, I think that this is a pretty wonderful place in 50 years that we're looking at right now.
Notice he doesn't have the right number on his T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, 88.5.
88 point. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Oh, I remember those days. Yeah, I was here for a couple of years before I went to 88.1.
Al asked me if he thinks maybe that was the first T-shirt. I remember.
Well, it's just the
no.
oldest one that I know of. I'm sure that.
But I remember a navy blue one that had a microphone.
Microphone and an 88.5.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
KVSC.
That was, to my thinking, the first T-shirt.
It could have been, but they didn't have things to promote. There weren't
Right.
stickers, and we did hand things, hand drawn.
Right.
Excuse me, little slip.
They were hand-drawn because you couldn't make donut
He didn't
letters
hear all
unless...
of it.
There was one promotional item we had in the early 80s. It was a canned cloud. You know, it was the idea, but they were in, you know, steel cans still at that time. So they're like throwing them out in the parade and bonking people on the head.
Oh my gosh! You know, we did a lot of remote broadcasts. We did the homecoming parade. They did hockey, did some football.
Yep, on the
So-
Yagi.
That basketball that they had down in Missouri, flew down for that, and you know that was
Yeah.
What a thrill for
Big deal,
to
yeah.
do that, and I'll feed
But
it
you know,
up here.
at the time we were also part of radio and television. We were for a long time under the speech umbrella.
Yeah.
You know, with Peeler and that crowd over there, and then you know Bob, what's his name?
Dr. John.
Dr. John DeSanto came in, and you know, then things got the course changed, and there were more professional aspects of things and organization. There were a lot more moving parts and people. But thank you.
Well, what I would like to do is if I could get your, you know, contact information, email address would be
Sure.
sufficient, and phone number, and then we'll let you know how this all turns out. We'll make it available to everyone. But this is sort of a missing link in the chain of the KVSC
It is.
story. I wasn't really aware of that until Joe brought it to me today and wanted me to make sure that we got.
And I
this
brought
story.
it to Joe because I'm I was flustered
That's
because
a cool card.
Queen of Everything.
Queen of everything.
Oh, it's a VW bus.
It is.
That's what I'm seeing.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't have mine written down.
Neither
Oh.
do I.
You know what? I've got a little. Look at me.
Look
the
at
old
you,
reporter.
All right.
Brought
Thank
a
you.
notebook.
No, you read the website for KV, and it talks about history. And it shows pictures of people in black coats with skinny ties.
Yeah.
And then the biggest revolution has to do with somebody said, oh, we're going to play top 10, top 40 music, bubblegum music. And then they did for a while.
Well, sure.
For one
And
year.
somebody got really excited and they voted it out. And I thought, that's very small potatoes compared to going
There's no
from
question about Kelly's passion.
Bach, Beethoven,
You know,
and Brahms
He just
to Turner Bachman Overdrive.
Bachman Turner Overdrive. Right, Bob.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
PTO.
Yeah. Boy, that's all
I'm now with a deep track classic rock station called The Goat, and it's the 50th anniversary of the Summer of Love, so we're going to have these events, and there's the bus that we're going to be able to use. So
Where is
your
The
bus
Goat?
is It's in Sauk Rapids, Tri-County Broadcasting, but it's 107.3 FM
Okay.
is the frequency. But I mean, we go deep.
You have a
Bob.
card?
We play like Wishbone Ash. You know, I'm
Oh.
talking Robin Trout.
How about a little Brewer and Shipley?
Oh, yeah, we
and-
play Brewer and Shipley. Oh,
I worked at the Red
Jesse
Carpet
Cullen Young.
when it
One
was
top
owned
over
by
the
John
line.
Fandel, and the downstairs on the Larry Long, they had performances in the basement of the Red Carpet at the time, and it was a lot of folk, things like that, and they sang that music, and the vault was the liquor closet, and we'd have to light the fires in the fireplace.
wow. It's romantic.
Oh, it was romantic until I came off the bar one time with a Elmer Fuddpucker drink. Do you remember that name?
Elmer?
That was it was one of those
That was a
early,
drink.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it had
Yeah, well, no, I mean-
Galliano
Oh, okay.
and I don't know what all. But I came off and some guy bumped into me, sort of dumped it in his pants accidentally. I didn't last long as a cocktail waitress. But I'm so glad to hear about that music.
Yes. I mean, if you're a music fan of that era, I mean, we play right now a lot of music from '67 in the surrounding area. So a lot of Jefferson Airplane, Doors,
Yeah,
Grateful
yeah.
Dead. You know, the whole San Francisco scene of that time.
Well, when I say Brewer and Shipley, there aren't a lot of people who it resonates with. But thank you for
Well, they had
remembering.
the one big hit, but I mean,
yeah.
okay,
It was all about Bach.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time. It was
You
really
bet.
nice to talk about this.
great. I'm
Yeah.
glad you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it myself, and I wanted to be able to. I mean, I was a part of the chapter that you're talking about, and it was a big deal because what you had essentially set in motion was taken away. And so the philosophy was, and I do understand it now, the KVSC was not a good training ground for commercial radio. So what they tried to do was make it commercial radio junior. So for a year, KVSC played things like, let's say, Lionel Richie and Air Supply, you know, and not the Rolling Stones, right? And so it was such a disappointing chapter in the station's history that even the university agreed that it wasn't going to work. So that's when they started to invest in the station, and that ultimately was the next step forward in what it became.
Can you
But it's made of the same stuff, exactly the same stuff you were talking about. Okay?
what's that number?
Tell me about Kevin Leisure. He's a good friend of mine.
763
Oh, my gosh.
Really?
Oh, we love Kevin.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
in Bellevue, Washington.
Bellevue,
Yeah,
Washington,
yeah.
with a great
4334.
backyard and a waterfall.
43